Thank you. I'm dealing with intelligence and security matters for the last 40 years. And especially I'm dealing with Iranian terrorism and Iranian intelligence since '87. It was just after the attack, the Iranian attacks in Paris in '85 and '86, and the so-called Lebanon hostage crisis. So I think I'm a little bit familiar with the way Iran and Tehran are using terrorism as a political tool. William Bourdon said at the very beginning of this press conference that this will be an unprecedented trial, and it is very clear it will be, because it will be the first time we'll have an official Iranian, a diplomat in the box on the trial. And this will underline something which is extremely important and which was not really understood in Europe and especially in Brussels and Paris for the last decades. Terror, when it comes to Iran, is not an accident. Terror is just a political tool the mullah regime could decide to use at one moment. When it is confronted to a threat or when it has to advocate its interest and its goals, the Iranian regime has a few possibilities. They could use normal diplomatic relations, they could use commercial relations, they could use, of course, intelligence, as other states do, but they could use also terror. And they will, and when they decide to do this, it is not decided just by one man somewhere in Tehran. It's the whole regime which decides, because everything is depending of the Supreme National Security Council, the SNSC, and inside the SNSC you'll find all the representatives of all the most important centers of power in Iran. You will find, of course, a representative of the President of the Republic, of the Supreme Guide, but you will also find the Speaker of the Parliament. You will find the Chief Justice. You will find the Chief of General Staff, the Chief of the Army, the Revolutionary Guards, and so on. So it is very clear that all those people, there are 12 usually, all those people, when it comes to use terror as a political tool, are concerned because they are taking the decision to do so. There is clearly, it was said by the Iranian that the first defense was that everything was a Zionist or a Western plot, and this terror attack was a fake and was never a real terrorist attack. The second line of defense of the regime was to say that the Assadi, the most important defendant, was a rogue element, someone acting on his own. It must be very clear that something like a rogue element doesn't exist in the Iranian regime. When it comes to intelligence, when it comes to terror, when it comes to serious things and serious concern, there is no independence of people and there is no rogue elements able to decide on their own that they will conduct a terrorist operation in Paris or in London or in Vienna. I would like to add a few words to answer a question which was asked a few minutes ago. What can we wait if Assadi is convinced? Very clearly, and all the story of Iran since the last 4 decades goes in the same direction. Very clearly, we can wait a terrorist or several terrorist operations, not only against the Belgian interest, but probably against the European interest, maybe against France, maybe against Germany, and so on. We know, for instance, that the regime tried to exert a considerable, and it didn't try, actually it's exerted a considerable pressure on the French government to push the French government to ask the Belgian authorities not to prosecute Assadi. So as France failed in what was requested by the regime, France could be a target for the Iranian terrorism. And not only on the French soil, but also, of course, in the Middle East, in Africa, or in South America. This is the nature of the regime. And most of all, it is also a pure product of our weakness. I mean, the European weakness. For since 1980s and the 1990s, the mullah regime conducted several numerous terrorist operations against European interests, both in Europe, in Vienna, in Paris, in Berlin, in other places, and in other parts of the world. So clearly, there was no real answer to the European answer, I mean, firm European answer to those terrorist threats and those terrorist actions. And Tehran understood that it was possible to threaten and even to attack Europe without having any price to pay. All the opposite. Those attacks benefited to Iran, which got exactly each time what it was looking for. So I think clearly that the only question today is what European Union should do and what European Union will do after the trial if Assadi is convinced, which is meaning that behind Assadi, of course, it will be all the regime and all the government which will be taken, must be taken accountable for this terrorist action. I thank you.